Yeah, I understand when the minimum wage was first enacted. I'm not sure the exact number that it was, but if it had kept pace with inflation, it would be around $22 an hour. So $15 is the starting point. Certainly in New York City, people have to work 2 jobs just to pay the rent, sometimes 3 jobs, and it's not fair that if you're working hard, you deserve a decent place to live. And $15 is a step in the right direction, but I think it needs to be done at a federal level and indexed to inflation. And there can be some carve-outs maybe for small mom-and-pop businesses, but big companies like McDonald's and Walmart, they can afford to pay their workers a lot more, and certainly I think it's the moral thing to do.
Most things in life, people want the economy, the ones that are affected most by the robot.
Yeah, there's an immediate disruption if people lose their job to a robot, and I'd say that we have to think of corporations not only as having duty to their shareholders, but duty to their employees as well. And I think they should share in some of the costs of educating workers so that they can compete in the new environment, the new economy that our technology has created. And that's something that Bernie Sanders has been talking about, in that the level of your education should not be determined by the wealth of your family. It's hard to predict who's going to be a genius, and if somebody drops out of school because they need to get a job to support their family, or a sick parent who might not be able to produce income or provide for the costs of education, it's a detriment to our society to not let everyone study as much as they're interested in studying, and as much as they're capable, as far as they're capable of going. Europe does it that way, so if you want to go to school to become a doctor, you can do that. Not everyone is going to pass the exams. They have a very high competition, and people don't make it past the first year, but at least they're given a shot. And if they're smart enough and can do the work of a medical doctor, then they become doctors.
So you're a proponent of trade schools and helping people that might not be
community colleges, trade schools, public universities. I think these should all be publicly financed so that anyone who has a motivation, just like our high schools now are free. That wasn't always the case. It evolved that way, I think, when more and more people were leaving the farm, and we realized that we can achieve economies of scale by the technology that came to the farming industry. I'd like to talk about GMOs as well, in that sense, because that's a harmful technology with a chemical called glyphosate that I think is poisoning our food supply. But that's a separate conversation. Well, you see, there's nothing wrong with mixing a yellow pea and a green pea. There is something wrong, however, when you dump a chemical on that plant, that genetically modified plant, and it's genetically modified to resist the herbicide that's put on it. It contains this chemical called glyphosate, and when the plant grows up, everything around it dies, all the weeds and the bugs and other living organisms. But the plant survives, and it survives with this chemical in it. And the food companies are not telling us what level of glyphosate is in the food chain. And so you can imagine GMO soy, GMO soy oil, GMO sugar. These are ingredients that are in nearly all our foods, and so they contain elements of glyphosate. And the research is being done now about how this glyphosate can affect neural development in pregnant mothers. And there are some scientists who believe that it causes everything from autism to cancer. And there's a scientist at Harvard University who said this. So my attitude with things like this and fracking is that we have to take a precautionary attitude, and nothing like this that affects our public health, our drinking water, our food supply should be allowed until it's absolutely 100% proven to be safe. Because otherwise we're putting corporate profits ahead of the lives of our citizens and our residents. I mean, you don't have to be a citizen to come to the United States and eat our food, and you don't have to be a culinary master to realize that a tomato in France, where they don't have GMOs, tastes a lot better than a tomato in America. So, I think the FDA needs to do a better job. Congress needs to do a better job. However, when Congress is bought and paid for by special interest groups and corporations that have a vested interest in the status quo, members of Congress are not listening to the public. They're not serving their role as guardians of the public, and it's a real tragedy.
You're running against Nydia Velazquez.
Well, I don't say I'm running against her. I think she's done some good community work. I like her. So I tell people I'm running against the apathy and indifference because in 2014 only 4% of our district voted in the primary. That's 4% of the 231,000 registered Democrats.
You think that'll change this year because of Bernie Trump?
Well, I wasn't going to run again after 2014, but when I started listening to Bernie and I saw how enthusiastic people were for his message, I said, well, I'll try again. And Bernie's talking about my message about the corrupting influence of money in politics. And like in 2014, this time I have nearly 100 grassroots supporters and volunteers who are helping. And I think that's going to be a major difference in turnout. And we're actively pushing the press to cover our election. Part of it's for selfish reasons. Of course, I want to win the election, but it's a big disservice to our community and our society when the press ignores an election because the voters then don't even know that there is an election, so they don't vote. And when they don't vote, their voices aren't being heard.
How do you do it? Are you knock on doors?
Well, we did some door knocking in 2014, and I've actually done a little door knocking this cycle, but because New York City buildings are often hard to get into, we found it's more efficient to reach voters on the streets and by making phone calls. During the petition process, I walked all around the 13 neighborhoods of the district and talked to people, from, you can imagine everyone's walking around, so it's about 735,000 people live in our district, and there's around 231,000 registered Democrats. So you can imagine when I was trying to get signatures, I had to ask 3 people just to find one registered Democrat. Which is fine, because it's nice to talk to people who aren't registered Democrats as well. They're people I want to represent as well. It's a disgrace that people who serve our country are then not taken care of by our country, and we fight these wars abroad, and then we're neglecting our own people at home. I've spoken with homeless people as part of, the petitioning process, and I remember one gentleman in Cypress Hills, which is at the northeastern corner of the district, and he was saying, why don't we build more SRO housing? People who are down on their luck, family situation is not good, they can't rely on family for whatever reason, and maybe they even have a job, and they're working hard, but they can't afford an apartment. I mean, Bushwick used to be a place for artists, and now the rents are so high that artists are, they're leaving New York City altogether, which is a tragedy for our community. And, with veterans having housing issues, I think we need to do something about that. And building more SRO housing, I think, is a good idea, because you can build efficient, quality housing that's not necessarily glamorous, but gives everyone a decent roof over their head and the basic utilities. And of course, we're not doing that really because our politicians are essentially bought and paid for by developers. I think there's some good politicians out there who are fighting against that, but even when they're most well-intentioned, it's if the developers, for example, they formed a corporation called Jobs for New York, which sounds great because, yes, New York City has more for rent signs than help wanted signs up. And this was a corporation funded by developers, and what they did in District 1 in the 2013 city council election was carpet bomb the district with mailers, calling one of the candidates a fraud, who's not a fraud. She's actually a great community leader. And the incumbent won because of all these mailings. The challenger got 40-something% of the vote. I really think she would have won if it weren't for this Jobs for New York corporation that was just basically, it should have been called Developers for More Profit, Inc. And there's not enough transparency, there's not enough restrictions on our election process so that the voice of the voters can be heard, and not just the people who have the most money.
Fact checking on the congressional level would be very difficult. Barely see it in presidential race. Where people would go.
Yeah. So if I say I'm the strongest candidate, on this blog, maybe I could arm wrestle the other candidates to prove who's stronger, but it's to me it's upsetting that the media has largely ignored our election, and I think they ignore other elections too when they have a duty to inform the electorate that there's an election and that they have a choice. And I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of voters have become cynical and apathetic because they have the impression that big money controls the process, so their vote doesn't matter. And we try to counter that. We register voters, we talk to people. I happen to believe in the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you define a situation as real, it becomes real in its consequences. And if you're a voter and you believe that your vote doesn't count, well, you're right. If you're a voter and you believe that your vote does count, you're right as well. Well, I think the New York Times has been helpful in promoting Hillary Clinton for president. I'm not sure why. Right. So we just were interviewed by the Bushwick Daily. I expect a few more local papers will profile the election. At least I hope they will. There's less than 4 weeks now till the June 28th primary. And, we have a great communications director who's working really hard. She's been contacting the media. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the owners of the media sites or the editors-in-chief or both. They've painted me as a candidate with a very little chance of winning. So, they're almost calling the election before the voters have voted. But it's not supposed to be like that. They should say, here are the issues, here are the candidates, here are what the candidates are saying, here are the backgrounds of the candidates, and the election will be June 28th. You can look up your voter registration status here to see if you're eligible to vote in the primary. Almost like a public service, I think the press has a duty to inform people, and we've just seen media get more and more concentrated into the hands of just a few corporations. So I think, the mass media has been doing a disservice to our country.
So obviously you don't think that mass media was very helpful in finance. We had so many problems with the primary,
Yeah, that's a big scandal. How did over 100,000 voters just disappear? And what are the consequences of that? I know that Election Justice USA has started a lawsuit. By and large, the majority of workers at the Board of Elections are good people who are serving our community. But how did it go unchecked that one person was able to delete all these voters and, no explanation?
And on legalizing marijuana and how the lawsuit, particularly minorities, is put away for several months or years where whites didn't be put in that situation.
Okay, so that's two questions in my mind. One is racial profiling by the police. And I think the police have a systemic problem. They're walking around poor communities with guns, treating everyone like a criminal. They need to do more community policing. I think particularly in the public housing where Gurley was unfortunately killed. You're asking for accidents when you have people walking around with guns, even if they're police officers. I would like to see the police demilitarized. I would like to see the police do more community policing. They don't need to walk around the public housing units with guns. I mean, most people who live there are good, hardworking, honest people. They're not gunslinging drug dealers in the wild, wild west who want to shoot the cops. Not at all. In fact, I felt threatened walking around public housing when I saw police in the building, and I'm like, well, what sort of emergency is here? I don't think I would feel that way if the police were unarmed. And they have radios. The police can have highly trained officers who have to deal with bank robbers and armed drug dealers and things like that. But those are rare occurrences, and I think we can. At the federal level, we can encourage, since we fund local police departments, we have a lot of power to tell the police that they should not be racial profiling. They should be reflective of the community that they're meant to police, and that they should spend the bulk of their time getting to know the community, because that's how crimes get solved. If somebody sees something, they can be a witness, But if they're afraid of the police, then they're not going to want to deal with the police at all. If that trust isn't there. So there's a lot we can do with police reform, and I guess our criminal justice system in general. We were talking earlier about access to lawyers, and because of Miranda, if you're going to go to jail, I believe for a felony, you have the right to an attorney. If not, the court will appoint one. So we can also reform our criminal justice system. So that basically people are not put in jail for walking down the street and being a person of color. So maybe that's two questions in the first question. Your second question about legalizing marijuana, I think the states are the ones who can decide that issue. At the federal level, it should not be scheduled as a hallucinogen. I think it's a throwback to an era of prohibition. Marijuana has been shown to be medically useful, recreational. I think that should be decided at the state level. But more importantly, hemp is a sister plant of marijuana with such low levels of THC that you cannot get any sort of high off of it. It's crazy to me. This shows how inactive Congress is that we are now importing hemp from China and Canada, where they grow hemp for food, for construction materials, for clothing, There's actually, I've read that there's medicine, there's over 20,000 uses for the hemp plant. It's one of the most useful plants in the world. Farmers in America are prohibited from growing it. However, we're allowed to import it from other countries. So let's just ship all our jobs overseas and have the people outside the United States grow the hemp and we'll buy it. It doesn't make sense economically, and I think we need to basically at the federal level take any restriction away from growing hemp, and we can allow the states to decide about marijuana. I think there are a lot of people in jail for for the wrong reasons, and we need to fix that.
What would you like to tell the voters?
Well, my name is Jeff Kurzon. The election is June 28th. I have a website, jeffkurzon.com. I've been telling people that Congress should be working for the people, not the big corporations. Me llamo Jeff Kurzon, soy candidato por el Congreso de los Estados Unidos y creo que necesitamos un Congreso que trabaja por la gente y no para las grandes sociedades. When you have an issue in your district, you need to let your member of Congress know. We call our members of Congress congressmen or congresswomen, but they really are, in my view, they're problem solvers. Their job is to make our communities better. And over 100,000 people in my district live in public housing, and I've spoken with them, and they say that the quality of living there has gone down over the last 20 years. Young people are graduating from college. They're having hard time finding a place to live. Many of them move in with their families. So you have 3 generations of families living under one roof, and they're saddled with debt, and they're not able to pay off these loans. So how can we solve those problems? Well, we can make college free, public universities certainly. We can subsidize loans more for private universities. We can allow students with unreasonable amount of debt to file for bankruptcy and hold the universities accountable for not training the students in the proper skills that are needed in the workforce. Having them take some of the risk will, I think, motivate them to do a better job of finding employment for their graduates. We need to reform the way our elections are done. I'd like to see matching funds at the federal level. Imagine an election for 6th grade class president. Would it be fair if the teacher said, okay, we're going to have the election next week, and she let one of the students who wanted to be class president have 3 pieces of poster board to put up signs, and then she let another student put up 200 poster boards. That's essentially what's happening with our election process now. So we need to limit timeframes, we need to limit expenditures, and we need to provide publicly financed elections so that Congress really works for and represents the needs and interests of the people. That includes healthcare. I think the Democrats controlled the Congress and the White House, and they passed the Affordable Care Act. But poor people can't afford these $5,000 deductibles. It's very difficult to navigate the choices that one has with respect to insurance. Small companies don't want to hire new people because they're afraid that their costs are going to go up so much that it won't be profitable if they go over 50 employees, so they stick at 49. That stifles our economy. Why don't we just have health care for all? Medicare for all. We do it for our seniors. We have Medicaid for the poor. But what if everyone just didn't have to worry about their health care the way it works in Canada, France, England, and most other industrialized countries in the world? We can afford it. Why did we not do it? Well, the Affordable Care Act was written by the insurance lobby. And so I want to ask the voters in my district, well, are you okay with big companies and big corporations writing our laws through their lobbyists. Effectively, what do we even need members of Congress for? Let's just let the corporations run our country. Or, we could have a reverse revolution and ask the Queen to come back. I mean, our democracy is broken and we need to do something to fix it. And so the only thing I ask of the voters is to vote. Don't vote for me, just vote. Figure out who the candidates are, figure out who best represents you and your interests, and get out there and vote. The election's June 28th. 2014, less than 10,000 people voted out of 231,000. That's approximately 4%. So if 4% are the ones voting, more power to them. But, a lot of those voters are basically voting because the message of the candidate with the most money, the most corporate money, has reached them, and they think, based on that money and the spin that money has created, that they're the best for the district. And I think voters need to do their own research, because right now the media is not helping. So just thank you for interviewing me and taking the time to listen today.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.